Terrence Oglesby, I know he played at Clemson, but he is a confirmed Big East guy. And last night in college basketball was all about the Big East. T.O., let's talk with, let's start with Villanova Xavier. We have a little text chain going between the three of us. And about 4 minutes ago in the first half and through the end of halftime, we were sitting there. That text chain was going off. Xavier is kicking Villanova's ass. We knew Xavier was going to be awesome. I told you they were the best team in the Big East, this, that, the third. Comes out in the second half, Villanova big boyed them. Talk to me about that game. Talk to me about your takeaways from that performance.
Well, in the first, my concerns with Villanova are still the same. Like, if you can guard them one-on-one, you're going to be able to give them fits. And let's just call it what it is. They got some home court Villanova calls too to kind of get those runs going. That's what happened. It was at Villanova. I'm not telling some kind of tall tales. That's just the bottom line. I still like Xavier. I think they got cold. I don't know how else to put that. They got cold. They couldn't hit shots. They struggled to get in the paint a little bit. And Villanova really locked up on defense. But in the first half, I mean, you're going to start out that hot from three. It's going to help some things. I mean, they threw one in from the V. It was supposed to be a pass, and it went in. It was just God telling you that Xavier was going to come out on top in the first half. Second half, they struggled to maintain. And then, Villanova found some better ways to get into the paint. And from what I saw, and I was in the air when this game was going on, but Xavier, whenever Villanova started running more ball screen actions, Villanova was able to get in the paint. And whenever they did so, that's when they're at their best, because then they can just pick, they can attack closeouts and things of that matter. But I just think Villanova, if you can guard them one-on-one and you take care of the glass, because if they're able to get on the offensive boards, that's when they fan out for threes, because that's the best time to take a three, because the defense sucked in, you find guys out on the perimeter, it's target practice because you're stepping right into the pass. That's when they can really beat you. But I'm not off the Xavier bandwagon. I still think they're a top 4 team in the Big East. I don't have a particular order right now because it's still up in the air. But at the same time, you have to be pleased with part of their performance. Villanova, they're just going to figure things out. I mean, it was gut check central for them. Yes. They needed that after coming off a 20-point loss at Creighton, which Creighton's been one of the most surprising teams in not only the Big East, but the country, because they've just been able to win. I mean, sometimes it hasn't been 20, but that hasn't been pretty, but they've been able to win. And Villanova needed this one. And that second half nut up was probably exactly what the doctor ordered going into Christmas.
That was a culture win, right? Like that was
100% a culture win.
Yeah, that was where Villanova said, you know what, enough of this bullshit. We're going to get this thing done right now. I was really impressed, Fanta, with their ability to kind of take away Xavier's big guys. Like Jack Nungy didn't do all that much. Zach Fremantle didn't do all that much. And that was where we were like, yeah, you know what? I don't know how Villanova is going to be able to deal with any of that size that Xavier has inside.
Well, you're right. And I think that when I look at this matchup, Paul Scruggs and Kobe Jones combined had 7 turnovers, the majority of them coming in the second half. Xavier was trying to throw entry passes into their post players, and that just didn't work. Some lazy passes in the second half. You can't get lazy against Villanova. That's one thing you cannot do. And so regardless of the fact that if Villanova, as currently constructed, if you play a half-court game and you say we're going to out-rebound them and we're going to defend and you're probably going to have a decent shot, they still reminded us last night that if you make mistakes against them, Jay Wright has developed a system that will capitalize off said mistakes. Xavier had 13 turnovers, the majority of them in the second half, and they started 6 of 6 from 3. 6 of 6 from 3. They proceeded to miss their next 17 three-point attempts. That is incredible. I don't think I've ever seen that in a game. Villanova actually went back to the well and went old school on us. They turned this into an old school game. They did not win this game with a 3-point shot. They only hit 1 3 in the first half. They hit 5 in the second half. This is the team that was averaging 9-ish threes a game, 8 to 10 threes a game. What they did in this game is they did defend ball screens really well. They cut Xavier off from the post, so they forced Xavier out on the perimeter to hit tough contested shots. And then I thought that in the second half, especially, Villanova finally started to hit. Like, Villanova was 11 for 60 in their last 5 halves of basketball at halftime last night from 3. 11 of 60. Somewhere along the road in those 63s, you're getting a lot of open looks, but at some point you have to say, it's not working. We have to take the ball to the cup. They attacked. And I thought it was very symbolic at the end of the first half last night. Caleb Daniels drove the ball and threw down a one-hand slam. It was almost like an angry slam of like, we are so tired of not being able to hit perimeter shots. Just go to the rim. And that's exactly what he did. So 4 players score 15-plus points. I learned a lot about Xavier in this game. I don't even know how much I learned about Villanova other than with their backs against the wall, they did what you would expect a program that's won 2 of the last 5 national titles. They found a way. They got to get, though, big picture, Jermaine Samuels has got to start to be better on the offensive end of the floor, and he knows it. 2 of 7 from the field again last night. He's just struggled here early in the season. I feel like the breakout's coming, but they got to figure that out here, big picture.
Yeah, that's kind of a pretty good encapsulation of why this Villanova team is not what the other Villanova teams were, because Jermaine Samuels is probably at his best. Like if you put him in the perfect role, he is your 4th or 5th option offensively and a guy that's out there to be switchable on the defensive end, to go out and get some rebounds, to be tough, to be physical, to be the guy that like sets the tone of physicality. Yeah. You don't want him to be the guy where you're like, yeah, we need him to go out and get us 15 points, right? I think you could say the same thing about Brandon Slater. Like him in an ideal world is a 3-and-D guy. He catches and shoots open threes. You lock up people on the defensive end, and you don't really have to rely on him to do too much creative stuff. Their issue is that, like, they don't have. I mean, we've talked about this before. They don't have that first guy to kind of like their entire offense is drive, draw, help, kick, attack, a closeout, drive, draw, help, kick, get in the paint, jump stop, find an open shot, whatever it is. Like it's very basic, simple stuff. But they don't have the first guy to create that action. So I think that's pretty symbolic of what the issues are with Villanova. Go ahead, Tio. Oh, muted.
Oh, I'm on a cold streak.
I remember my first podcast.
When it comes to the mute button, I am struggling. I will say this. Eric Dixon looked a lot bigger last night than he did against UCLA.
Yeah.
He looked really big. And Fanta, you alluded to them trying to get the ball in the post. Eric Dixon, he might not be the tallest dude in the world, but that sucker's wide, and he is strong as an ox. He puts his chest on you. There's a big difference between Xavier doing throwing the ball in the post at the block and then trying to enter a post feed to 15 feet out. And then that closes the gap for the guy guarding the ball. You're going to turn the ball over because you're in such a condensed area. So defensively, Eric Dixon was huge in being able just to root out, if nothing else, play physical and root them out to the mid post, as opposed to Fremantle and Nungy getting it way deep on the block. I mean, that the difference between 3 dribbles and 1 dribble for a big man, for big men in college basketball, the percentages are huge. And I thought Eric Dixon was terrific doing that.
One additional thing on the Big East for a moment, and this needs to be told. There is a clear mental edge that Villanova has in this conference. There is. And that's why it was so shocking to see Creighton beat Villanova on Friday night the way that they did, but especially at home and especially at the Pavilion, where since 2013, Villanova is 41-1 in Big East home games, at the Pavilion in particular. Last night, you said it that Xavier went cold. Xavier was like the bride at the altar who got cold feet and told everybody, I can't do this anymore, and they ran away. They ran out of the church. That's what it felt like, at least. Xavier was in a prime position to get married last night and get their vows sworn in and be told, you are the best team in the Big East. They were playing like it. They were playing like it in this game. The mental edge that Villanova has should not be overstated. I liken it to Kansas's streak of 12 Big 12 regular season championships. People seem to not always remember. Villanova's won 7 of 8. The one that they lost by a single game to Xavier a couple years ago. They have a mental edge. I thought last night, I still think Xavier has more ways that they could score the basketball right now. and they lost the game. There was a lot of, I thought in the second half, as much as I didn't think there was necessarily a major shift in the way Villanova was playing. Villanova plays one way. I thought that mentality changed a lot. And I thought Xavier got pretty passive in the final 20 minutes, and it led them to really getting some cold feet and losing this basketball game because Villanova just seems to be a different force, particularly at their campus building, which didn't even have students inside it last night. It had a wine and cheese crowd.
I will say this: there were two possessions in the first half on Xavier's threes that were just get the ball out of the rim, take off. Villanova doesn't communicate, and they throw it up to the wing, and it's a wide open three. Second half, that didn't happen. They weren't getting those same opportunities. So obviously, Jay Wright went in at halftime and laid into some people, but they just weren't getting the same quality of looks.
All right, so let's move on to some of these other teams in the Big East. Providence went into UConn, beat up on the Huskies on Saturday. UConn bounced back with a win on Tuesday, going into Marquette. Marquette was without their best player. We'll get into that conversation in a second, but Fanta, where do you slot Providence now? Like the whole season up to this point, we've kind of talked about how it was Villanova and Seton Hall and UConn and Xavier, and those are the four teams that are kind of at the top of this conference. Where do you have Providence in that picture? Are they good enough to kind of crash that party?
They are good enough to crash the party. Do I think that they will win the Big East? I'm not saying that, but in a year like this where the league kind of has a wide openness to it, and right now we're off to a bit of a strange start to conference play with some forfeitures and some interesting circumstances. The fact is the Friars are 2-0 now in the Big East, and they're 12-1 technically on the season here. This is a basketball team, though, that is a really difficult matchup. In fact, I would fit them into a puzzle of saying, I think they're a tougher, like, one game matchup. If I had to take a team and put them in a simulation of one game between the coaching of Ed Cooley and between their makeup, as you saw on Saturday, Rob and T.O., the Friars are a difficult team to play because on offense, Providence runs their flex stuff, but also does a good job of running guys off of screens, setting them up for open shots, and it's Ed Cooley's stuff that really works well and worked well on Saturday. AJ Reeves was the difference in the first half by hitting a couple of perimeter shots. This is not a pretty team. They don't win pretty. That's not what Providence is. Saturday's game was ugly, but it doesn't matter. They got a little bit of pretty from AJ Reeves in this game. They have the constant in a five-man in Nate Watson, who, if he's not producing points, he at least is taking up the space, the real estate inside that you better take him into account or else you're going to pay. And then I think for them, the last couple of years, Providence has not had a lead playmaking guard.
Yes.
Some people may say, well, wait, John, you're wrong. David Duke was not someone who was playmaking for other people. He could score the ball himself. He could do things himself. Al Durham, who actually has some New York roots to himself, a kid from down south, but some New York roots, he plays the game that way, guys. Ed Cooley has unlayered new parts of Al Durham's game and allowed Al Durham to really break out of a shell and be the lead playmaking guard for this team. So when you combine that with a terrific big man, a senior in Reeves who's been doubted, and now Reeves doesn't have to be the guy. He can get set up from someone. Jared Bynum doesn't have to be as large of a role. He's more fitting in his role right now. And Noah Horkler and Justin Minaya can both be X factors. They've got some depth. They have several fifth-year players. And they have a coach who frankly, coming into this season, was totally doubted. The Friars are a factor.
The thing about Cooley that makes him so good, and Terrence, we were talking about this a little bit before, is he is so smart with some of his game plans. And they don't always come off, but he's one of these guys that can scrap what they do and do something totally different and kind of catch you off guard. Like they never switch everything. And when they played against UConn, they switched everything. And they took UConn out of all of their like UConn runs a ton of sets. Like everything they do is sets. Everything they do is scripted. And if you can kind of take them out of that, then you run into a situation where they're like, you got to go win a one-on-one matchup. And without Adama Sanogo, they didn't have that.